Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I think, you and I have been discussing on and off, I think actually since last year's Oscars, themes related to this topic around entertainment and technology that's developed or utilized in the entertainment industry and how it drives a lot of expansion outside the entertainment industry because of the unique nature of it. So I'm really looking forward to today's discussion.
I'm thinking back to Wavefront in '84, and we were, one of the first to get out there and start using this technology, but it was for flying logos. But it was at the exact same time that engineering organizations saw us and said, "Oh, we can use this for." I think our first customer was visualizing accident reconstructions. So it all met, making the technology allowed you to do a flying logo still could work on understanding how a car would work. I'm curious, when we were talking about what this show could be about, you were really strong in your opinions of how the entertainment industry has this historical role in the way they adopt technology, new technology, and then from learning from that, how that drives development and drives things like, I'm thinking now augmented reality, AI, immersive experiences. Just one last little tidbit. When we went to NBC and put our software in at NBC years, this was in '86, '87, it stayed in what they called the Magic Lab for a year before it would get integrated into, the mainstream. So I'd love to have your thoughts. You've been around this for a long time.
Yeah, I think there's a sort of unique dynamic in the media and entertainment industry in terms of technology adoption. I think your wavefront analogy is perfect, right? It started with a desire to use a computer to make pictures, right? Whether it's flying logos or something else. And that's who rushed to this technology. And many of the visual effects pioneers were exactly those people. They were like, let me see what I can make the
Right.
computer do. I think it has all this capability. And right alongside it, there is a commercial engineering design application where being able to visualize things is very important and enables new discoveries and new ways of looking at problems. And I think the visual effects industry, because of the way the incentive around visual effects, there has always been a sort of competitiveness within visual
Mm,
effects on a film by film basis where
mm,
you see something and then the next big film needs to be better. It needs to be more realistic or bigger or more of it or more expansive or I've just never seen this before. So this never seen it before sort of drive is part of what happens in visual effects. And I think the other part of this that really influences why you see adoption pickup and exploration happen very quickly in visual effects is because what they're trying to solve for is sort of visual fidelity. Like there's always trade-offs, right?
mm.
They're trying to make something that looks the way they want it to look. And they're bending and using and exploring and using the technology to do that versus a commercial or sort of more scientific exploration needs to have a lot more rigor in it whereas visual effects tends to start with I need it to look right, and it just so happens that in most cases, in order to understand how it looks and behaves properly, you need to go back to the science anyway. So in a lot of ways, I like to think about or talk about visual effects as sort of being an advanced R&D arm for things that later
Mm.
are adopted because they're exploring a lot of those problems in a sort of scientifically lightweight or scientifically informed manner, but not with the rigor that's required before you bring something into the commercial marketplace.
In visual effects, it's to your what you just said is, does it look right? Now, and we were talking yesterday about how you went and studied animals and MRIs of animals to be able to get the muscles right. So I think now it's not just does it look right. I think over the last few years, is it, do they move correctly? Do they act right? Do they have all the dynamics? Are they real? Which kind of leads me to the AI part of this. Are we on the big cusp of them actually being real?
This is where you get into sort of interesting semantics in terms of words. Um, First, I think what you're trying to do from a visual effects perspective is you want it to look real. And in most cases, the way to make it look real is to make it as scientifically accurate as best
Okay.
you can understand it,
Yes.
right? That's what gives you the realism. And so when you get to, and that's the realism can be either real as you and I would experience it in the real world, or it could be real to the world that it is in, right? If it's a science fiction movie, it may have a different set of rules, but it still needs to conform to whatever the rules of that universe are. So from that standpoint, it becomes more expansive. And that's where I think your question about AI and how it gets adopted and where it takes us is interesting, because visual effects again is in that place where a lot of the conversation around AI right now is dominated by generative AI and the creation of words or pictures or video that is being sort of generated, through the computer, through the use of AI or machine learning. And it will allow you to see many more options for things more quickly. So when I think about the advancement, the immediate advancement and integration of AI into visual effects in particular, it's around that expansive, what could it be, brainstorming multiple options area that I see this first adoption happening. And that can be either grounded in a strict scientific reality, or it cannot be. And I guess the question now also is, do you know? Will you be able to know which one that is?
When you talk about being able to see a lot of variations, the director says, I'd like to see it, this way, hey, give it to me this way, this way. With humans, a human can read the line in 20 different ways. And even and we both can remember a time where the director would say, I'd like to see it this way. And it's a week later before they would see that, right? And it is a tremendous amount of work. Are we perilously close to the time where the director, the creative director, the person who's telling the story, can say, give me 20 versions of that and see it in dailies in the morning, or maybe within an hour?
I think it depends on which part of the process you're in. If it's concept design, early, sketches, previs, those types of things, I think you will see that coming along probably more quickly than we realize. As you get further and further into the pipeline, and again, I don't want to go too in depth into the visual effects part of it, but at the early stages, you're looking for quick iteration and understanding visually, what does it look like? Are we headed in the right direction? The further on you get in the process, you want more accuracy in terms of, does the idea really work? Does it have, does it sit well in camera space? Is the lighting accurate? Not just, does it look interesting? Because at some point, you're going to have to actually make that thing. And so that's the thing that becomes a bit harder. And maybe there's some sort of rough analogy to where people are using and integrating AI into their workflows now, where you're using it as a start to a letter, a poem, an outline, whatever. But then it needs to be real. It needs to be, well, I really need it to be like this, not kind of like this, but actually this. It needs to be grammatically correct. It needs to have that word, not that word. There's always going to be the human involved, at least for now, deciding, is this the thing that I want? And when you were talking about the director, I think there's also another thing that will be sort of a governor on the acceleration of the many options situation, because is this what I really want? Like most people, you want some choices, but not infinite choices, because infinite choices is paralyzing. So you may want 20, but you probably want somebody to cull the 20 down to the best 10 that best understands your intent. So there's always going to be, yes, I could have infinitely more than I currently have, but that's really not helpful for me.
One of the concerns where this past year, we had a writer's strike. AI was a big part of that. We had an actor strike. AI was a big part of that. I know we've been doing digital stunt doubles for years. I mean, for years, there have been digital doubles. Do you think it was the release of ChatGPT and the accessibility of it that kind of freaked everybody out?
I think it accelerated it, absolutely. And I think, and maybe this is my, marketing bias, it's not just the release of ChatGPT, but the instant dominance of the conversation. People that had very little or no awareness of AI all of a sudden had a ton of it was just everywhere. Maybe they understood it a lot, maybe they understood it a little, but it was kind of everywhere. And so it just accelerated, I think, an anxiety, at some levels existential, but just an anxiety around, can I be replaced? And I think, can I be replaced sits on top of artists being concerned, whether they be actors or technical artists, being concerned about being fairly compensated for their work product. And this is an interesting definition, because if you're creating a likeness, if you're creating a digital double for someone, how much of your work product is your visual representation to the world? If I'm an actor and I look a certain way, particularly a way that's recognizable and that has, historic box office success associated with it. My work product is, I just woke up in the morning and maybe I used moisturizer, and that's my work product. And if you go use it without my consent, or if you're using it in a way that makes a whole bunch of money, what portion of that do I deserve, whether I'm physically there or whether you're just taking advantage of who I am? And I think that is going to be at the center of these conversations for many years, both in Hollywood and just for everyday life.
The earlier, I remember going to the first Digital Humans conference. It was 25 years ago. So it was a long time ago, right? And the realism just wasn't there. I mean, it was close, and we were all applauding where we were at, but they weren't intelligent. They're still dumb, if you will, right? Someone had to move them. And now we can actually, you couldn't say, hey, Dave, get up from your chair and walk into the room. Couldn't do that to a digital actor. How close are we to being able to do that? Direct a digital character?
Well, from a visual fidelity perspective, you're there. Given enough time and money, either of us could be digital in this conversation, and 99% of the world would not be able to tell the difference.
Right.
In terms of being able to instruct the digital representation,
yes,
I think we're probably a good distance off from that. I'm not as close to that space, but just what I understand of it and the people that I've talked to, I think you're quite a distance off between being able to train a system to be able to have all of the natural nuance that humans have, because in some ways it's going to learn from us. If you were watching some of the news over the last couple of weeks, you're hearing conversations around how robotics coincides with AI and training and all of these things. And it's all trained on watching us, listening to us, understanding what we do. And there is so much that we don't even understand about, nonverbal, unconscious communication. It's hard to fully get to the place where you would think you'd be able to train something that could drive something that complicated in a way that looks human. I'm sure it will be possible or close to possible, but probably not anytime real soon.
It's all interesting, especially when you look at the kind of supercomputers that are getting built now that are literally 1 million times faster than they were 20 years ago. Just the speed is stunning. So as you were talking, I was thinking, well, how would you teach it? Well, where do we have a lot of cameras? In London. There are more cameras in that city than anywhere else. So Could you take all those cameras and say, I want to learn how humans, how they walk and how they, all the facial stuff, all of that, and have that be the language model, if you will, for it. Interesting, very interesting. Do you have an idea of a technology that we thought was going to be great, and we all jumped on it, and then it was kind of, oh yeah, kind of wah. Maybe a quick example.
I think there are many of them, I think, and all of them fall along the line of disappointment in terms of how big or how quickly you thought there was going to be an impact. And I think, in the visual effects space, there is a lot of that because of this sort of tinkering, workshop oriented aspect of being at the sort of bleeding edge of creating something new, and it has to be utilized maybe only for one film, and then maybe you put it down for a few years and then you pick it back up again. There is not always a linear adoption path. I think the classic example would be virtual reality at this point, which I'm not sure is entirely done. I think it has probably another wave left in it. I remember about the time you were starting Wavefront, maybe a little bit after that, going to a VR experience where I had this wieldy helmet, and I was in some sort of carpeted barrel, with a cabled, button that was a sword. It was very crude, but it showed sort of capability. It showed what it might become. And then it sort of went away. And then it came back again, and then it went away. And then it came back again just a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, and it sort of moved from virtual reality to augmented reality. And there was a whole big conversation again around semantics about, well, what is virtual reality versus augmented, and how do we want to see it, and can we see through things? And the Apple Vision Pro, again, is in that sort of space. I think that what you're seeing is really a slow, steady adoption of spatial computing, people being immersed in an environment, and that type of technology always sounds great in terms of its promise, and it feels like you can solve it. You can intellectually go, well, if we can do this and this and this is going to be everywhere. But the this and this and this always take longer than you expect.
Dave, thank you so much for just kind of opening our eyes to this new conversation that we're having every day, it feels like.